नमस्कार, श्रेष्ठ भारत में आपका स्वागत है और आप देख रहे हैं हमारा खास कार्यक्रम उड़ान। आज हमारे गेस्ट हैं एक यंग और बडिंग ऑथर तरुण महर्षि जी। तरुण, वेलकम टू द शो।
थैंक यू कन्हैया जी।
आज हम डिस्कशन करेंगे इनकी पहली बुक द पोर्ट्रेट ऑफ अ सीक्रेट पे, जो कि एक बहुत ही एक्साइटिंग बुक होने वाली है और जिसको इन्होंने अपनी पहली बुक के तौर पे मार्केट में उतारा है, जिसको आप और हम अमेजोन पे और सारे डिजिटल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे देख सकते हैं, पढ़ सकते हैं, ऑर्डर कर सकते हैं। तरुण, आप एक प्रोफेशनल हैं। यू स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम लॉयर एंड देन मूव्ड ऑन टू स्पोर्ट्स मार्केटियर एंड देन बिकेम ऑथर. What prompted you to become an author and write on subject like this?
At the end of it, I think it was simply that I had a story to tell, which I believed I could tell, and COVID gave us the time to actually write that story. So circumstances came together at the right time, and that's how the book really came to be born.
Are you satisfied with the outcome of this book?
I think every author would say it could be better, but I would say it is a good read. It is nearly there. Maybe if I had a little bit more time, it could be a little bit tighter, but I am fairly satisfied.
So, as you have pitched it, it's based on some actual circumstances which can be relatable, but it's a fiction. It's a work of fiction. I read the book, and the spread, geographical spread as well as the subject spread that you have tried to put together, it's very vast. What was the real challenge?
So there are two significant challenges to the book. One was that the basis of the book, the truth that underlies the book, was an interesting, but at the end of it, not a properly fictional story. To actually create the characters, the narratives, the twists and turns that were required to make it compelling, that was one of the challenges. The second was because we're dealing with a lot of historical events. There had to be a fair amount of research done on each of those historical events to try and present them in a relatively honest light. And while the book does fictionalize all of them, they are based in fairly extensive research on what happened at each of those events. And the research maybe doesn't come across in the amount of space that's been given to those events in the book, but there is a fair amount of hard work that went in to try and weave those historical events into a single narrative.
So the next question obviously is this. The spread, as I said, is very it is from, you start from 1917 and come up to around 2010, 2012. It's a very vast period in history. और इसमें बहुत से कैरेक्टर्स ऐसे हैं जिनकी रिलेटेबिलिटी, अगर आप बुक पढ़ रहे हो तो यू कैन रिलेट टू दोस कैरेक्टर्स.
हर सीन की सेटिंग, बिकॉज टाइम पीरियड अलग है, ध्यान रखना पड़ता है कि उस वक्त कुछ गलती नहीं हो रही है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एक सीन है जिसमें एक गार्ड अपनी ड्यूटी कर रहा है, बट क्या उस टाइम पे उस गार्ड के पास एक मोबाइल फ़ोन होना चाहिए था या उसके पास ट्रांजिस्टर होता? ऐसी छोटी चीज़ों का ध्यान रखने का कोशिश किया है. 1917 की बात करें तो उस पीरियड में तो जाना, सोचना कि क्या हो रहा था, वेरी हार्ड फॉर अ पर्सन ऑफ माई जनरेशन. बट ऑफ कोर्स जब हम 2010-2014 में आते हैं, दैट्स द लाइफ वी हैव लिव्ड, सो दैट पार्ट इज रिलेटिवली इजी फॉर अस टू बी एबल टू नरेट.
आपने कई हिस्टोरिक फैक्ट्स को बहुत ही बखूबी सिंपल लैंग्वेज में कैप्चर करने की कोशिश करी है, या इफ आई मे यूज द टर्म जरूरत की है. आपको लगता है कि you have been able to do justice to it?
So this is not a book of history, right? This is a book of fiction. The historical facts are aids. These are facts that everybody who has received an education in India will likely know. So they are just aids to weaving a larger narrative. But I don't think I have misrepresented the facts in any way. Where I have, it's deliberate. For example, in the case of the Tashkent story, I have deliberately chosen another time frame just to disassociate with the circumstances of that event while still building on an event that every Indian does know about. So I'd like to believe that no fact has been misrepresented, and where it has been twisted or turned a little bit, that has been disclaimed in the book as well.
It's like a screenplay, and I started reading it, I couldn't leave the book. वो जो screenplay का तरीका है, where did that style of writing come from? What inspired you to do that?
So that's a kind compliment. Thank you. I'm glad. The idea was to write a book that people didn't want to put down. And I think that's based just in what I read. And my reading throughout my childhood has been thrillers and crime fiction from the likes of Ludlum or Tom Clancy or Patterson, and it's still books I really enjoy reading. So it has no pretense of being a work of literature as such. It is a work of fiction. It's designed to be pacey, something that you want to pick up on a flight, maybe read over a couple of nights, and that's really where it comes from. It's just grounded in what I have read as I have grown up as a child.
Also very relevant part of these books is there are certain issues or facts. आज के समय में भी, आज जिस माहौल में, जिस पॉलिटिकल सेटअप में हम लोग फंक्शन कर रहे हैं, वो भी बहुत रेलिवेंट है. क्या ये कॉन्शियसली आपने ये टॉपिक्स, ये रेलिवेंस चूज किया, विच स्टिल रेलिवेंस टू टुडेज यूथ, टू टुडेज political mind space?
Consciously, perhaps not, but it is the life one is leading. So unconsciously or subconsciously, those circumstances tend to seep into your story, just to build a narrative that strikes the author himself as real, and that's really where it's coming from. But there is no agenda to put in a particular circumstance or a particular set of ways of living or being that had to form part of the book. It's just what was required at that point of time to weave that story together.
आज का जो पॉलिटिकल नैरेटिव है उसमें इन सारी घटनाओं का क्या रोल देखते हैं इन बिल्डिंग ब्रांड इंडिया वॉट एवर इट इज टुडे? उन सारी घटनाओं का रेलेवेंस, उन सारे इंसिडेंट्स का क्या रेलेवेंस है?
So India has come a long way from what we used to be when this book started. In 1917, we were ruled by the colonial powers. We were a non-entity in a sense. Today, we occupy a powerful position on the world stage. And I think that story sort of comes through in the book as well. The characters speak with confidence. They are global citizens. They are happy to deal with powers in other countries. And they're not willing to take a step back to do what is necessary for protecting India's interests. So that really, I think, reflects our G20 presidency. It reflects being the fifth largest economy in the world. It does reflect what India is today.
Basically, these kind of books, real stories turned into fiction होते हैं, तो उसमें बहुत से शॉर्ट कमिंग्स रह जाते हैं. पहले तो ये बताइए कि कितना टाइम लगा आपको ये पूरा बिल्डअप करने की, ये केस स्टडीज को टू पुट टुगेदर, इतने बड़े वास्ट टाइम फ्रेम को और ऐसे कैरेक्टर्स को एस्टैब्लिश करने के लिए कितना टाइम आपने रिसर्च पे और कितना टाइम आपने प्री राइटिंग इस पे स्पेंड किया?
I think pre-writing period itself would have been at least 3 months to just do the research, and then as you write, more and more ideas come into your head. So often you'll step back from the writing, do more research, then get back to writing. But that entire period probably took 2 years to write the entire book to get to a stage where a first draft.
अगर एक फर्स्ट टाइम राइटर के लिए अगर कोई इनपुट देना ऑथर के लिए, तो क्या 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 इन 2 सालों में?
नौकरी की, which occupied a large part of my time, and मेरे को लगता है कि जब एक हार्ड नौकरी चल रही है, it's very hard to free up the mental bandwidth to be creative outside your job. But उसके अलावा I've basically taken time off from work to get the work done. मेरे में वो वाला डिसिप्लिन तो है नहीं कि रोज सुबह उठ के 6 बजे 1 घंटा लिखा. जब क्रिएटिव फीलिंग आई तो वो स्टोरी को आगे बढ़ाया, एंड एवरी टाइम देयर इज अ लॉन्ग ब्रेक, इट टेक्स दैट मच लॉन्गर टू गो बैक, रिविजिट योर स्टोरी, अंडरस्टैंड ऑल द स्ट्रैंड्स, पिक देम अप अगेन एंड देन ट्राई एंड टेक दैट स्टोरी फॉरवर्ड. बट रिसर्च चलते रहा, केप्ट राइटिंग, केप्ट रिवाइजिंग. जब मौका मिला एक और चैप्टर ऐड किया, जब मौका मिला एक और चैप्टर ऐड किया, और बाकी सारे चैप्टर रिवाइज करते जाओ. सो एट द एंड ऑफ इट एटलीस्ट ऑल ऑफ दैट प्रीवियस वर्क इज ऑलरेडी डन.
तो 2 साल के रिसर्च के बाद कितना टाइम लगा आपको ये बुक पूरा फर्स्ट ड्राफ्ट फाइनलाइज करने?
So 3 months to research before we started writing, 2 years to actually produce a first draft, and then another 6 or 8 months thereafter to get it to a stage where it's now in front of an audience, and we look forward to seeing what they have to say.
कोई भी ऑथर का आज के समय में सबसे बड़ा विश यही रहता है कि उसका कोई भी पीस ऑफ वर्क हो वो इवेंचुअली स्क्रीन पे दिखना शुरू हो जाए. तो जब आपने ये बुक लिखना शुरू किया, क्या आपके दिमाग में ये चीज भी चल रही थी? बिकॉज द वे यू हैव रिटन इट इज लाइक अ स्क्रीन प्ले. जो मैं कहता हूँ, एवरी चैप्टर वो कैरेक्टर एस्टैब्लिश करना हो, उस कैरेक्टर की अपनी क्वालिटीज एस्टैब्लिश करनी हो, यू हैव वर्कड ऑन इट, आपने उस पर काम किया है. तो क्या आपके दिमाग में वो चल रहा था उस समय?
जब लिख रहे थे तब तो ये बिल्कुल दिमाग में भी नहीं था. तब आइडिया वाज कि बुक को बिलीवेबल बनाओ, मेक इट समथिंग दैट पीपल वांट टू रीड. Yes, once people have read the manuscript, this is my luck, it's my fortune that people are saying it has potential to be converted into a screenplay. I'm very open to that. I'd love to do it. I'd love to be part of that process as well, just to try and build a new skill. But it wasn't the intent when I started writing the book. The intent was to produce a book that people wanted to read.
Again, the next question comes. It's a complex issue that you have tried to touch. It काफी जटिल विषय है. उसको आपने बहुत ही सरलता से सरल लैंग्वेज में लिखने की कोशिश करी है. उसका चैलेंजेस क्या था?
मेरे लिए तो एक्चुअली वो ज़्यादा चैलेंजिंग है नहीं. मेरे में ना तो रश्दी साहब का ना तरुण साहब का वो क्षमता है कि मैं वो डिफिकल्ट इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज करेक्ट वर्ड यूज़ कर पाऊँ. I read relatively simple stuff. I write relatively simple stuff. So for me, this is very natural to write what I read, essentially.
तो आपको लगता है as a author for the first time, आज का जो यूथ है उसके लिए ये रिलेटेबिलिटी ज्यादा है क्योंकि वो कंटेंट ज्यादा चाहता है, वो लैंग्वेज, वो लिटरेचर परहैप्स से ज्यादा कंटेंट पे फोकस करना चाहता है?
I would think so. I think 100% that is true. It is a book that anybody should be able to read. ऐसा कोई भी शब्द निकले जो डिक्शनरी में जाके देखना पड़े, that is unlikely. It flows easily as you read it. So hopefully it does appeal to not just the youth but to everybody who wants a relatively light read.
You have touched many issues, many subjects, many geographies इस किताब में, many time frame. आपके लिए सबसे लवेबल कैरेक्टर, सबसे लवेबल टाइम फ्रेम कौन सा था, लाइकेबल टाइम फ्रेम कौन सा था?
मेरे लिए तो सबसे लवेबल कैरेक्टर है जो हमारे ब्यूरोक्रेट है इस किताब में। आई कम फ्रॉम अ ब्यूरोक्रेटिक फैमिली, तो मेरे लिए वो कैरेक्टर लिखना सबसे आसान था। आई हैव सीन अ लॉट ऑफ द ब्यूरोक्रेट्स इन माई लाइफ। इट्स ऑल्सो अ टाइम फ्रेम वेर आई वॉज मोस्ट इम्प्रेशनेबल। बच्चा था, बचपन से ही देखा है कि ब्यूरोक्रेट्स कैसे दिखते हैं, कैसे बिहेव करते हैं, कैसे बात करते हैं। तो अगेन आई होप दैट इज द मोस्ट बिलीवेबल कैरेक्टर इन दिस बुक। आई ऑल्सो लाइक द कैरेक्टर ऑफ द चीफ ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस, एंड आई डू थिंक दैट it would be the kind of character that might actually exist in real life if he was heading an intelligence service. Somebody relatively serious, very passionate, very patriotic, but very practical in what compromises need to be made as well.
इस बुक का और एक टेक अवे विच इज वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग और आज के समय में बात करना उसका ज्यादा रेलिवेंट और जरूरी भी है, द वे कंट्रीज आर रन, उसमें इंटेलिजेंस का बहुत बड़ा रोल होता है, विच प्रॉब्ली अब और ज्यादा फोर्सफुली हम देख पा रहे हैं। आपको लगता है उस टाइम में जो इंटेलिजेंस का रोल था दैट वाज अंडरप्लेड और अंडररेटेड?
I don't think so. I think intelligence has been vital from history as far as back we can think, right? I can think of, say, Chanakya talking about this in his books in the Arthashastra, but the way intelligence is gathered has perhaps changed, but the importance of gathering intelligence has never changed. And my interviews, my discussions with various other people that worked for the intelligence community have been associated with it, suggest that our ability to pick up intelligence has improved as our economy has grown, and we're able to allocate more budgets in this direction. Whether it's human, whether it's technological, we're just able to do a lot more than we could earlier.
Very interesting part that you have touched now, that you talked about the economy. You have said very clearly that economy always drives the political structure when a country जो है एक level तक पहुंच जाती है। आपको लगता है that time for India is now come?
I think the beautiful quote I read somewhere was that in the long run, however you define that, economics always triumphs over politics. And to me, that appeals instinctively. Money does drive the world, whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I have no judgment on, but it does drive the world. Are we seeing it in India today? I think there's a nice balance in India today, right? The BJP, as they lead this country, is trying to figure out how to grow the economy while also doing what they need to do to retain power in the country. And that balance will continue to play out for the next several years. It's just a fascinating thing to watch as it develops every year. But nobody can argue with the results. We are the world's 5th largest economy and growing, and we are perhaps the only demographic in the world now which has a chance to continue to grow over the next couple of decades. Everybody else is aged to a point where it's unlikely they can grow any further.
आपकी बुक का premise है, the canvas उसका बहुत बड़ा है. Suppose tomorrow, it's a wishful thinking obviously, and tomorrow it turns into a cinema, it goes on the screen. आपको लगता है this canvas can be captured? और इंडिया में इसके पहले I believe कोशिश नहीं हुई इतने बड़े कैनवस को कैप्चर करने की. Will it be a challenge? और ये आपको लगता है कि अपॉर्चुनिटी भी है कि आज के समय में?
I think Bollywood's capable of doing whatever it wants to do today, right? That 5th largest economy also helps on the movie side. There's enough money within the country to spend the money to build a viable world-class product. I think it'll be relatively easy for anybody in Bollywood to do. Maybe not anybody, but several of these directors and producers to do. Whether it does happen, whether they do a good job is something that time will tell. But certainly believe it's possible.
आपकी बुक इज प्राइमरीली इन इंग्लिश, लेकिन जो सब्जेक्ट है और जो वे ऑफ राइटिंग है, हमको लगता है कि हिंदी ऑडियंस के लिए भी एक अच्छा रीड है जो लोग हिंदी भाषा से ताल्लुक रखते हैं या रीजनल स्पेस में. तो आपके दिमाग में क्या ये भी है कि यू विल टेक इट फॉरवर्ड टू रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस? एंड
Again, I'd love to. If there is that kind of demand from the market, absolutely love to. I'm sure Penguin, as my publishers, would love to do it as well. But we are still in the first print run. The book's just come out. So we'll wait to see how the audience reacts, whether people actually buy the book, how many of them they buy, and then we'll take a decision on whether the translation can be done. Can I do the translation on my own? Very unlikely. My Hindi is a lot weaker than my English. It's sad, but it's true. But certainly there are enough people in the country who can translate this quite comfortably into a Hindi novel as well.
If we consider this book as a benchmark for converting into a new age cinema with this kind of canvas, obviously, आपको लगता है ये एक अपॉर्चुनिटी भी है इस देश के लिए जहां हम अपनी हिस्टोरिक फैक्ट्स को एक नए तरीके से वर्ल्ड के सामने पेश कर सकें?
बिल्कुल, absolutely. I think there are a lot of things that have happened in Indian history which perhaps have not been disclosed to the Indian public. I have spoken to some members of the intelligence community that have spoken about operations without necessarily detailing them, saying that there is a lot that we do to protect this country, to further its interests, which we can't talk about and which we don't put out. And maybe it's not just intelligence, right? Like I said, there are enough things happening in this country which most people don't know about. we were chatting briefly about it earlier, but governance and everything that's happening on governance as well. It's easy to criticize the government, it's easy to criticize our politicians, but a lot of the good work that gets done also doesn't get told. So I think there's a story and an opportunity there as well, whether it's DBT, whether it's Aadhaar, whatever else, but there is a story to be told in the good work that happens as well.
फर्स्ट टाइम ऑथर्स के लिए आपका क्या सजेशन होगा, जो हमारे दर्शक पहली बार बुक लिखने की सोच रहे होंगे या उस फील्ड में जाना चाहते हैं, उनके लिए क्या टिप्स आप दे सकते हैं?
मुश्किल है. It's a lot of hard work. The odds of getting published, that's something I learned after I written the book, very, very low. So I'm very blessed, very fortunate. It's a long, hard, lonely road. Nobody in the world can help you finish that book. Shuru karna aasan hai, but to get it to a stage where you can actually send it to somebody to review, it takes a lot of work. I'd say if you have the passion to do it, absolutely do it, but बीच में मत छोड़ना. खत्म करके देखो. You never know what the end result could turn out to be.
So what are the three things, वो तीन चीजें कौन सी हैं जो आप बोलोगे कि essentially आपको ये चाहिए ही चाहिए अगर आपको एक बुक लिखना है तो, जिससे आप compromise नहीं कर सकते? You need that.
The beginning of a story in your head, right? It might evolve, but you need at least a core idea around which you can build everything else. It sounds a little bit egoistical, but you need the ability to tell a story. Yeah? If you can't write it well enough, nobody's going to read it beyond your friends and family, if that. And you need a little bit of luck. Like in every other enterprise in life, you need a little bit of luck that a good agent, a good publisher, somebody you know, somebody you come across actually is willing to read your manuscript and consider it.
So that is a very good note to end this conversation, and wishing you all the very best for your success on this book and the many more to come. Hopefully आने वाले दिनों में आप इस बुक को पर्दे पे भी देख सकेंगे. Thank you Tarun for spending time with us, and we wish you all the best.